It's Monday, the 12th of March, and it's time to go up in the Mighty Luscombe and do an Oroville update. My name's Juan Brown, and you're watching the Blanco Lirio channel. Before we head on up, I want to talk a little bit about where we're at in this project. Right now, we're at what's called the first half of phase 2 of the rebuilding of the spillways at Oroville. Remember, phase 1 ended at the end of October of last year, and that gave us an operational spillway, 100,000 CFS operational spillway at that time. Also, of course, a lot of work got done on the emergency spillway during that time period as well. Phase 2 began the very next day, the 1st of November of last year, with work primarily focusing on the emergency spillway. The beginning of phase 2 of construction at Oroville consisted primarily of work on the emergency spillway, getting that secant cutoff wall finished, getting the cap beam in place, and right now they're beginning to pour RCC, roller compacted concrete, over that portion of the emergency spillway that had no concrete or anything poured over it during the emergency. The second half of phase 2 will begin around May, once we determine that we're out of the flood season safely. At that point, work will continue back on the main spillway and on that portion of the emergency spillway that does have concrete poured in it from the emergency. Remember, on the main spillway, starting in May, they've got to take that first 1,000 feet or so of original old spillway, rip it out completely, and rebuild it with structural concrete. And also, the entire section of roller compacted concrete main spillway, all those RCC walls got to come all the way down. The RCC cut back, the thickness of the structural concrete slab, and then structural concrete laid in that section of the main spillway. Those walls got to come all the way down in order to correctly build the drain system for the final product on the main spillway. Once the new spillway is completed, it'll have a capacity of 270,000 CFS, but again, operationally, the main spillway at Oroville is generally never run harder than 160,000 CFS to keep the levees below from flooding. This entire project needs to be wrapped up by January of 2019, and that means phase 2 is going to see more work and more concrete poured at Oroville than was poured during phase 1.
So we got the next weather front moving in, which was the other point I wanted to make about our discussion on the weather, is there is a series of rainstorms coming this week, which will help add to our total amount of rainfall for the season, which we so desperately need. But right now today, that means it'll be a little bit of a bumpy ride over Oroville. Back zone booth, mixture reach rules on the left tank is full. Nevada County traffic cluster 71608. Depart runway 25, Nevada County, straight out to the west. Finals clear. Bit of a tailwind for this takeoff.
County traffic 49256 Victor, clear runway 7, Nevada County.
See him, and he's clearing. All right, quartering tailwind, takeoff. We're out of here. Let's go to Oroville. Not as much crosswind as anticipated.
The 777 Delta is left downwind, runway 7, Nevada County.
Okay, we got a twin on the downwind for 7. We'll look out for him.
Flying over the Oroville Reservoir here on the 12th of March, we're looking at a lake level of 729 feet. Now, we've had the good series of rainstorms that were predicted, and as of the 16th of March, the lake level has risen 10 feet to 739 feet. The inlet to the main spillway there is at 813 foot elevation, and the new flood control plan for Oroville this year is to keep the lake topped off at the most at 800 feet. So given that the Sierra has only 6 to 10 feet of snow and the rain we're getting here in March, still looks like there's no chance that the main spillway will be run this year. And keeping the lake level below 800 feet will be easily controlled by the Hyatt power plant alone. Now we're passing over the emergency spillway where most of the work is being done right now. Let's take a closer look. Looking downhill from the far end of the emergency spillway with a structural concrete plant in the foreground. Here's the location of the far end of the emergency spillway, the new and improved wall along the edge of the old boat ramp. Here's the location of the secant cutoff wall and cap beam structure located some 700 feet below the emergency spillway. Here they've moved the RCC or roller compacted concrete plant a little closer to the work here at the emergency spillway. Now here's the new and interesting waterfall or step down feature along one of the low points of the secant cutoff wall, where there's going to be 2 low points directing water over the secant cutoff wall and into the natural low points of the terrain. Here's an area where they've been placing leveling concrete over that section where they've been blasting bedrock down so that they can get enough depth to cover this entire section between the emergency spillway and the secant cutoff wall with 10 feet of roller compacted concrete. Here's some DWR footage showing the process. Remember, roller compacted concrete is like a man-made bedrock. It's concrete with no steel reinforcement. It's laid down in 15-inch lifts and then compacted down to 12 inches. And it's a 24/7 operation where you continue to add layer after layer to avoid any cold joints. If you do have a cold joint or do need to stop work, you can reinvigorate the joint with what's called a green cut by watering it down heavily. And by building this in 12-inch lifts, you're able to easily create these step-down features. Now, some folks have expressed concern about placing what appears to be RCC right on bare dirt. Well, it's a combination of dirt and bedrock, but since the RCC is 10 feet thick, this does not present a problem. Here's another view of that step-down feature, and it looks like they'll have to reopen that natural canyon once they remove the RCC plant. Here's some photos courtesy of DWR showing a little better view of the topography of this step-down feature on the emergency spillway. Here you can see the final RCC apron that's going to be placed on the downhill side of the secant cutoff wall. There in orange you can see the top of the cap beam structure. So looking back at the big picture of the emergency spillway from the other direction in the Mighty Luscombe, this is the section they'll be working on in this first half of Phase 2. So over the next couple of weeks you'll see this section fill with roller compacted concrete. After this year's flood season, this is the section of the emergency spillway they'll be working on beginning around May, where they'll have to rip out all that old concrete that was placed during the emergency and replace it with roller compacted concrete. And right about here is where that second low point step down feature will be added. Directly below us in the middle part of the screen was the huge stockpile of gravel that was extracted from the Thermalito diversion pool, and that stockpile is just about all used up, or will be used up soon. Which makes sense that all the material that came out of Croyle Canyon had to be processed and put back into Croyle Canyon to form the RCC portion of the main spillway. And so now that the secant cutoff wall is over 700 feet away from the emergency spillway, more than twice the original design, much more RCC material is needed, and crews are having to grub all around the site to gather up that material. But there's plenty of material here at Oroville to create the RCC needed to finish the emergency spillway. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the main service spillway, crews are having to build an access road basically along the edge of a cliff in order to get access to the dentates or diffuser blocks so they can repair these diffuser blocks and rebuild the very end of the main service spillway. One last flyover of the massive dam structure here at Oroville as we head back to Nevada County Airport for a little crosswind landing practice as the winds have picked up.
Nevada County Airport. Automated weather observation. 19er Zulu weather. Wind 150 at 6 knots. Peak gust 15 knots. Visibility more than 10. Sky condition few clouds at 3,300 feet. Temperature 17 Celsius. 2.7 Celsius. Altimeter 3010 inches of mercury.
Base runway 7, Nevada County.
So the winds have picked up a bit since we left as this weather front approaches. It's a bit of a gusty crosswind out of the south. So that's going to make things rather interesting in the Mighty Luscombe. What I'll do for a landing is a three-point landing. A lot of folks say, why don't you do a wheel landing in a crosswind situation? Well, in my opinion, you're just delaying the inevitable if you do a wheel landing. You still got the tail up into the wind, subject to weather vaning. I like the idea of a three-point full stall landing, which I'll demonstrate here, hopefully, such that you got the tail wheel glued to the ground, you're done flying, and you have positive control of the tail wheel on the ground. Now, that peak gust of 15 knots, that's getting close to exceeding the crosswind limits of this Luscombe, so just be ready to go around, and if you have to, divert to another airport where you can get the wind more down the runway. The only way to prevent a ground loop from ever happening is to never allow the nose to wander more than a few degrees off of the center line in the first place. So watch for that nose tracking down the center line as we get into the flare for this crosswind landing.
Now here's a classic example of what I mean by a ground loop, video courtesy of YouTube. This is a North American AT-6, World War II trainer. As you can see, it can heavily damage, if not total, your aircraft, even for such a benign maneuver. The strong ground looping tendency of a tailwheel aircraft is because the center of gravity is located behind the main landing gear, kind of like pushing a tricycle backwards. This is why the invention of the tricycle gear aircraft, or an aircraft with a nose gear, all but eliminates this ground looping tendency. Strong crosswinds make it much easier to ground loop an old tail dragger.
So we'll be landing on runway 7, landing to the east, quartering crosswind out of the right, out of the south. Runway 7, of course, is uphill. I'll be landing long on runway 7. The air is generally smoother at about midfield. You do not want to be caught down in this hole, in this steep downhill hole on the end of runway 7 with these kind of winds. Not only is it super choppy, but you can get yourself in a situation where you may not have enough power to recover from a heavy sinker.
Luscombe 71608, 2 mile final, straight in 7, Nevada County.
So we're coming in with plenty of speed. We'll bleed it off once we get down there. You can just feel how choppy and punchy the air is. So right now I'm crabbing into the wind, and this is helping me determine how much crosswind there actually is out there. And of course this is going to have to be straightened out in the flare. And you do the same thing even in the big airliners. If you start crabbing into the wind like this real early, you're going to barf all your passengers out in a big airliner. I can see the windsock looks direct crosswind.
Final 7, Nevada County.
Landed, aiming for way up there by those 2 white markers. Sinker, big sinker right there. Okay, start straightening it out. That was too much airspeed in the flare, ballooned on up. That leaves you very vulnerable. Let's go get some gas. Now, the only time I ever damaged an airplane was at the gas pumps on a windy day like today. So you want to park yourself into the wind and get you some wheel chocks, and don't let the wind spin the aircraft around and bang into the fuel island.
Which one of these is mine? I'll take this one. 6.6 gallons, $30.03. So if you feel compelled to put a little fuel in the old Luscombe fuel tank via PayPal, that'd be greatly appreciated. PayPal at Juan Brown, JUANBROWNE. So I think when we review the tapes on the landing, it's been a long time since I've landed the Luscombe, getting over the flu and all. You'll see I pretty well was over controlling on that landing in anticipation of the crosswind, and had a little excessive speed in the flare and got into a float in a balloon. And of course, a kablamo landing is an approved solution in a crosswind landing kind of situation. Get that tail wheel all the way down and the aircraft fully stalled. See you here.